Wow. Well, this is fun. Well, this is a lot of fun. Well, Ivan,
I,
I'm glad we finally get a chance to talk.
yeah, yeah, cool.
So,
It's fun to see you in high definition on my screen live and
yeah.
interacting with me and responding to the things that I say.
And you're not behind that big, I don't know what it is you actually work on there. It's what is that, a giant computer?
It's a tablet. It's a Cintiq, 24 inches, provided by work.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it. I'm really fortunate in that, like the week of COVID, where they sent us all home to work, I didn't have a table large enough to hold that thing until like I was walking past, like just some people were leaving some junk outside,
Uh-huh.
and including a table that was large enough that it could actually house my this new Cintiq that I was going to bring in, plus the monitor that was already there, and but small enough that I could bring it into my apartment by myself, and so that was very handy to have.
Wow. Wow. That's providential. So
Yeah.
let's, I don't know if this is something that you think we'll might want to share at some point, or just between us, or just Discord. But if it is something we want to share, we should probably do a lot more background information so people know what's going on here.
Yeah, yeah. Yes. Is this where I get into like my biography
Yeah,
until
this is it. This is when.
hmm. My father, he grew up in Saint-Romuald, Quebec.
Okay.
He's French. Romuald. He left home, grew up on a farm, left home around 13 or 14, made his way to Montreal, then Belgium, then finally Malaysia, where he spent like most of his adult life. That's where he met my mom. They got married, came back here, no, here to Montreal. That's where I'm right now, Montreal. And started off kind of at the bottom. My dad was just welding. My mom was typing, but they were able to craft. By the time I came along, a decent middle class environment for me, and only me, because I'm the only child. So
Could only
that,
afford one between a welder and a typist, probably.
yeah, yeah. No, it was fine. I never learned to share, but I had a lot of time for introspection and just like I spent like much of my time like divided between going to the library, just like reading all their books, going outside the park, wilderness, and watching cartoons. I watched a lot of cartoons, and yeah, I suppose that developed like a lot of who I am now. But I won't explain that. Maybe that's just me like thinking now from backwards. But in terms of my spiritual development, I was baptized in my dad's Roman Catholic church, but I went to a Presbyterian church Sunday school. That's where I learned like all the little felt people Bible stories. And I did that for a while, but even in my like once I started hitting like 11, 12, I started like introducing subversive elements into the Sunday school class by like teaching the kids like how to like unleash their psionic powers. And I was a big reader, and I was reading stuff like Naomi Klein, No Logo, and then later on Shock Doctrine, and sort of like developing this whole idea of this evil imperial empire and the evils of capitalism and corporatism and all these things, and while also delving more and more into new agey things. So by the time I was like in my late teens, I was very much doing chakra meditations and practicing like my sigils and just really identifying more with like what I thought of as the goddess of the image over the god of the logos of the word. That was the distinction that I was making. And I was studying illustration to work as an illustrator. Eventually got into animation. Well, eventually, I mean, when I was like, I think 9 or 10, I pulled out a book from the library, which was Chuck Jones's Chuck 'em Up. Chuck Jones,
No.
his work. He's best known as the creator of like the Roadrunner and Coyote cartoons.
Yeah.
And he reinvented Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, sort of like set their personalities in stone from like the 50s up to maybe the 80s or whatnot.
Those are the cartoons I grew up on.
Me too.
Yeah.
I loved Merry Melodies, the Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
I had a very small selection of like videotapes, but I would watch them over and over and over again, and often like just play them frame by frame just to see how it worked. And
Really?
yeah, I was obsessive, man. And but like this Chuck Jones book, it was really cool because like not only did it sort of go into all the ins and outs of making cartoons and stuff, but on the side it was like a flip book of like the Roadrunner and the coyote doing stuff. And I thought, hey, I could do this for myself, you know? And so I started like asking my mom to bring home like all these little notepads from work so I could draw these little cartoons in the corner. And you know, looking back, I feel like I just not having any guidance whatsoever, I sort of developed what seemed like a very primitive form of Xenos paradox, you know, with like the Achilles and the turtle and like closing the space. And then I realized like between every movement of animation, there's like literally an infinite number of possible drawings you could make for each of them. And then, you know, we have the convention of 24 frames per second or 12 frames per second if you're talking television for animation. But you could be like whatever you wanted depending on the speed of the paper. And so I don't know, it really opened me up. It gave me something to be confident about because I developed, you know, some skill in the craft, you know, even in my early teens. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, I was talking about my spiritual development, and then I became a Christian. So
how did that happen?
That happened because I was working from home a lot at that time, and I had a lot of time to go into YouTube, which was fairly new at the time. You know, this was 2010, I think, and I found a video of a person who was making a case for the legitimacy of the Bible, you know, and at that point, you know, I was familiar enough with like the felt version of the stories, and you know, in our home, you know, my mom had you know, made me practice like saying grace, and so like there was that, but there wasn't much talk about God, but that sort of led me on a path where I would start listening to people talking about God and their experiences with Christ and all that. And that made me kind of aware of sort of my own position, because I you know, I was never a secular atheist. I was very open to the idea of a God, but it made me feel very aware of, you know, my culpability before this great being who's standing there judging me, you know, and so I, you know, one night I just got in my face and you know, I told this God that, you know, I would like to belong to him. I would like to, you know, and forgive me, you know, all that. And it really like kickstarted like a series of, I'm very experiential. Like I'm not keen so much on formulating like grand theses as to what happened, and I can just speak from my experience, and my experience was that like it really, like the things that I practiced, like it was made real in my life, you know, just like things of God being a father. Like I really grabbed hold of that, God being a father and like the discipline involved, and like, you know, he like, you know, like a young guy, you know, I was looking at the porn and all that, and but within a couple of months, like that was gone, you know, and like part of the way that was done was like the very last time I did it, that I got away with it, is like that same night I found myself like sitting in a CLSC or like a doctor's office with a doctor with like a couple of tongs reaching down my throat to pull out a fish bone that I was choking on. And I was like, he pulled out the longest, bloodiest fish bone I ever saw. And then in my mind, because like I'm like, you know, Pageauian symbolic universe type things, like, oh, this is God extracting the sin from my gullet and freeing me.
Wow.
And it really did the trick, you know. And it's like, obviously I had to leave behind like a lot of the new agey stuff, and that triggered that triggered like you're probably aware of the phenomenon of like sleep paralysis and things like that, and that like I made a strong association between that as a battle that I had to endure, while also calling upon the name of Jesus at that time to deliver me. And, you know, and so it became very very tangible, very simple way of relying upon this figure of Christ that I was getting to know. And and I still, I made a point of going to the Presbyterian church that I grew up in, but I wasn't feeling like the average age of the congregation there was like 75 then, So I kind of wanted to hang out with Christians my age, and so eventually I got to a Calvary chapel downtown, started hanging out with them. And I was very idealistic. I was the kind of New Zealist believer who would go up to a preacher after a sermon and say, "Where's the hellfire and brimstone?" And I'm really not like that now. But I had that Protestant, like even at the Calvary Chapel. I remember I started attending the prayer meeting one time. Like the first couple of months, I started going there. I'm nobody knows who I am, and like they've got like a cute little like fruit dish and stuff. And then like in the middle of the prayer meeting, without saying a word, I picked it up and then I left and I brought it to like these homeless people who were sitting like just around the corner, and it's like spend the time with them, and like this is the real church. Christ is with people at the margins, and there's a lot of examples of that, and I still feel very strongly about that, and I've tried to exemplify that. But I think at the time then I was a lot less concerned about other people's feelings. So I was doing a lot of that, but it was really cool. It was just really cool to see like the way God was weaving Himself into my life and in all these different aspects. And I'm not leaving you any room because it's starting to like flow. Like obviously I this morning I was thinking about like, what am I going to say? And then I'm going to give him my story. But it goes like kind of all over the place. So there's no way I'm going to keep this chronological.
Okay.
But yeah. Okay. So in terms of like how that intersected with my work, animation, by then I had been working in the field of animation. I finished my school when I was 19. I went to an illustration school. So I was working for about 2 years. And when I became a Christian, I threw away like all my old violent video games and all the stuff that was convicting me, and I didn't feel right about a lot of the gigs that I was getting, and so I stopped working. I started turning down jobs, opportunities. Even around that time I had developed, or was in the process of developing, a video game. By myself, it was gaining some traction, and somebody came and offered me like a whole bunch of money to start my own studio with him, as a partner, and like I just felt like I kind of am into this new thing right now, and I want to see where that goes, and also a lot of the other work that was coming my way was just stuff that was just too sexually charged, or violence, or whatever it was, that I just didn't feel right about it. But the thing is, I love cartoons, and I remember like it was 6 months where I wasn't working, and I was just not working, and I got on my face at one point, and I told God that I love animation, I love cartoons, but if I can't work in this field, I won't. If I can't find anything that's pleasing to you, I won't. But if I can, please make a way, and providence is a key word, I believe, because that same day, I got an email from a guy who had seen my demo reel, and he got me on to making cartoons for children, teaching English as a second language. And I did that for 1.5 years, and it was like so fun because I got to like write things and just have total creative control. And ever since then, I've just had an opportunity to work in all sorts of like really fun projects that are more kid oriented, more kid skewed. Before that, I was doing more grown up stuff, but it's just been such a thrill. And like when you see me now in the open studio, that's like I'm working on this like show for kids in French, Le Tissikeli, where it's like it's adventures, it's winsome, it's fantastical, and like I have like I'm in the writer's room, I'm doing the storyboarding, and like it's just, you just get to create something and bring it to life. And I just feel like, I feel like my conscience is clear with it too, and just lots of stuff like that. And I kind of went on doing the Christian thing for for a bunch of years. At 26, my dad died. It had been a long time coming. You know, my dad was, he married late. When he died, he was 92, Paul. Like, how old is your dad, right? You know?
My dad died at 77.
Yeah.
So, and that was, let's see, that was 8 years ago. So, and I'm 57. So that'll, yeah, your father had you late in life.
Yeah. And, you know, he had a stroke when I was 10. I was there, like he drove me into the garage and then like left me under because he had a stroke, you know, he was just like doing things at it, you know, and that just made it so that he couldn't work for most of my life.
Wow.
My mom was the income earner. My dad lost a lot of his verbal capacity after that, but you know, we could be present with one another, and that's how we exchanged. That's how we communicated. We would just like sit next to each other and read or watch TV or something. The last film we saw together was actually an animated film, Only Yesterday, which is one of the more obscure films in like the Ghibli repertoire. I don't know if you know Ghibli. Yeah, it's very nostalgic and quiet. But anyway, he passed away, and then immediately I thought like, I got to go live with my mom, you know, because she doesn't have any family here. I'm an only child. I packed up that night and went to go be with her. And my dad died very, very suddenly, you know, so it wasn't a long drawn out thing. So, and that sort of kicked off kind of very hard time in my life. You know, not just the fact of losing a father, but I think, I don't know, I'd had some difficulties with my mom, you know, when I became a Christian, you know, there was some strain there. Like I was too much. I was putting this ahead of her and ahead of like reason. She was always like, you know, she would always tell me like, you know, my father died young and poor and alone, and like you're gonna be just like him. So yeah, I mean that's hanging over. I never met him, but I think I do. But so I went to live with her for a while, and I think during that time I learned a lot about just you know, believing in God, trusting God when it's hard. I had developed a weird like muscle twitches and spasms, which I thought was like the beginning of some kind of like nervous disease or something. And I just had visions in my head of like, oh, this is it. Like I'm going to become like an invalid in the next 20 years, and my poor old mother will be taking care of me, and that's my life now. That didn't happen. But it was hard. But I have to say that there were, like, God was really speaking in that time to me as well. I remember sitting like in a field at one point, just feeling sorry for myself, and just, I don't know, the thought came into my head. This is like 2016 now. The thought came into my head that that verse from Psalm 27, which was, "Surely I would have fainted had I not believed I would see the goodness of God in the land of the living. So take courage, my heart, wait in God." And I just pushed it out of my head because I didn't want to be comforted. You know, I just wanted to wallow. And I pulled out this book that I just gotten from a used bookstore, Dag Hammershold's Markings. Dag Hammershold. Yeah. And I just turned to a random page. I just got this book. I turned to a random page, and like literally there, that verse from that Psalm 27, same passage, "Surely I would have fainted." Da, 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 da. And then, as if like that's not enough, that Sunday at the Presbyterian church, we project our psalms onto the walls. Yeah. And that was Psalm. That was the Psalm. That was the segment. That was the verse. And so, like, I held on to that and said, "Okay, I'm not going to faint. You know, take courage, heart." Actually, even before my dad died, there was God. Like, I had probably the closest thing to like a spiritual experience in that sense. You know, and I'm not going to go too much into it, but like all that plus a lot of other things was just offering me like a great deal of comfort during that time. And I saw even just like more fruit in my own life. You know, that was the time I started volunteering at a prison every week. I started seeing like people that I had invested in before starting to, just in like wild ways, you know. It's like, I remember I often feel like I'm my own insufficiency and my failure. I remember my failures very acutely, and I remember one night just during that period, just like feeling just like like a total failure, like, and that I let people down, like real people who, you know, I thought, you know, we were developing something, and then I dropped the ball, you know, and just apologizing to God, saying, you know, I'm sorry, I'm such a loser, I'm sorry, you know, this and that. And then again, the next day, you know, I get a text from a guy that I hadn't spoken to for a year. He's like an old ex-con guy, and he's sort of bound to his home. But I would visit him every now and then. We would pray and eat together. And he just texted me to say that, to thank me, and then to say that he's going to a church now in his neighborhood, and it's like reading the Bible. And it's like that. You know, that's the kind of thing that, like, if that's not God, you know, then I'm magic, you know. And I'd rather, that was just exactly what I needed. That was exactly what I needed at that time. And he's just been really good. And I suppose the way that whole season ended, it sort of closed on a hinge, when, because of my doing the prison and stuff, I got in touch with some people who brought me to Rwanda to do some just to work in the prisons there, do some translating English, French, you know, with not Rwanda, but with a team from Congo who would come into Rwanda. And so I wasn't there very long, but it was you know, long enough to establish some friendships and with people that I'm still in contact with now. And when I came back, God provided my mom with a dog. That's a whole other. Actually, you would love this guy. The guy who gave us the dog was he's like a Dutch Calvinist guy. You'd love him. He's from Minnesota. Yeah, he's really into Vervaeke, so like get him on this channel. I'd have to introduce him actually to the Bridges stuff, but yeah, he's cool. And he gave us the dog, and then that sort of like freed me to like, okay, I feel like my mom is emotionally all right now. So I moved out. I met my wife, and it was really neat. This is now, what is it? Probably late 2018. We were just having a conference at the church, you know, and you know, it was a Friday night. Most people were going out to eat, and I just felt like I want to be alone, because I always want to be alone. And I went down to the basement to pray for a little bit. And I was just telling God that I felt a little lonely, you know, and it's not something I complain about very much, because, you know, I'm used, you know, but I felt lonely. And then I go back upstairs and I see this one guy, Phil, and I say, hey, Phil, let's go get some supper. And we're eating at this little place next door. And then my wife, Sarah, walks by, and she and Phil are childhood friends, you know, they grew up together, went to the same church together. And so she comes in and she talks, and it's not a great moment to propose. You know, she's got like her dad in the hospital at the time then, and it's like, he survived, he's okay, but it was like, you know, it got to know her a little bit. And then she was looking for a place for her brother to go to church on the Sunday afternoon, because that's when our church service is. And so she came to check us out, Calvary. And yeah, she started coming, and I took her out on a date, and then we got married. We got married just before the COVID window like shut, like April 4th of last year. Like we were literally 5 people. It was like she and I, our minister, and 2 witnesses, and that's all. No parents, nothing. It was all
Wow.
It was all video. It was all done in the tiny little office. We saved a ton of money. And then when someone tried to give us like a little cabin for a honeymoon. We couldn't even do that. Like the police stopped us halfway and said, no, you can't leave the city. You got to turn back. Or else a fine of $6,000. But it was fine. You know, it was cool. It was
COVID honeymoon at home.
We're still in the honeymoon phase, basically, you know.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. And Sarah's just great, you know, like I couldn't think of a better fit. Like she started joining me for prison ministry while we were dating. She takes care, like her job is like she takes care of like the severely handicapped teenagers, you know, and so she's, you know, she's made of iron. She's but a big heart, and I just feel like we could do lots of stuff together. You know, we have a small space, but like we're both like really into hospitality. And I always think of like this, the first entry of like my journal from 2014 is this line from Jane Austen's Persuasion, where she goes like, and they all went in with their new friends into a home with rooms so small that none but those who invite from the heart could think of accommodating so many. And that's kind of our life right now, where it's like my office is also like the guest room. The bed's right here, and soon it's going to be also like the baby's room, because now we're expecting,
Wonderful.
And so like it's falling together pretty nice, those the goodness of God and the land of the living stuff. And unless I die tomorrow, I know there's going to be a lot of heartache and pain.
Yeah, there will be, but praise God for the good things now.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow, wonderful. That was wonderful. That was great. I loved it. Well, it's, because again, I see you're often in the open studio and you're there working, and every now and then your wife comes in, and and that weird open studio thing I started, people are like, what's going on with this room? It's strange. And it is strange, but it does afford this, these little connections. So how did you find your way to the Bridges of Meaning Discord?
Well, the same year that my dad died, I found the internet father. He actually, this is 2016, and he showed up in a newspaper, local newspaper, this Toronto psychologist making waves. And I thought I would check out his YouTube, because I was already like into like checking out YouTube like lectures, university stuff. Never went to higher education myself, but a lot of stuff was out there online, and I thought like, oh, this guy's really cool. He keeps referencing cartoons like The Lion King and The Simpsons. It's like, it's fun. Yeah, and there was obvious ties with like Joseph Campbell, and like I'm interested in story presentation and arcs and all that, and he really helped develop he developed my language. Him, and around the time I also discovered Slate Codex, Scott Alexander.
Oh yeah.
That sort of made that sort of tightened me up a little bit, because like I'm very credulous. I'll believe anything. When I was in my New Age phase, I was like buying orgone rocks and whatnot, and so like it really helped like give me boundaries, made me developed. I'd always tried to be like morally skeptical of myself, but this was a time when I also developed some intellectual skepticism and like why am I believing this? How is this working? And so yeah, Peterson was really helpful in that. He's an interesting figure for me, because I don't necessarily endorse everything he says. Like, who does? He says so much stuff, but it's like to me, he's been a great sort of kick in the seat for a lot of young guys in dire straits, and so that's been good. And from him, I started following your channel maybe two and a half years ago. I remember like I introduced you to like this this guy from China who was coming here to do diabetes research. We were driving around in my car and listening to one of your rambles, and it's like he was like, I don't understand any of this, and he was Christian curious, but he wasn't ready to dive in. And but I follow along, and then eventually it's like, yeah, I'm aware of your Discord. Until then, I'd only been using Discord for like this one animation Discord world thing, and it was just like not so, like when I was younger, I probably had a lot more energy to dive into internet communities. Now I'm old and tired. Like all these people.
You've got a child on the way. You have no idea how much energy you're going to need.
So, yeah, I mean, it's cool. Like I've been talking to some people, like cornering. I'll find someone like by themselves and corner them. It's like, hey, what's going on with you?
Yeah.
And I've had nice like surprise discussions, or I'll pop into like a group that's already happening. I don't do it a lot, just because I'm not someone who like likes to impose myself on others.
Yeah.
But it's as things sort of become more clear as to who's who and what's going on. It's like I've been finding it more rewarding to participate in the little ways, while at the same time being aware of like my the ways that I sort of like commit these intracultural faux pas, and because there's a culture there that I'm learning about. The whole meme thing. It's like I never really got into memes. I get what they're all about, but to me, what do? They're like they like I make media. I make the first thing, and then you come and you take you take an episode of SpongeBob, you know, and you strip a scene from its context, and you give it some other meaning, and you can't just like impose your meaning onto the text like that, man. It's like improper hermeneutics, and all of meme world is like co-opting the ideas and mashing them together into ways that the author did not intend, and that kind of hurts me as an author a little bit. And so like I look at the memes that I laugh at them, but I feel like a part of me is sort of getting corrupted as I laugh with them.
Wow, that's amazing. That's true. I'd never seen it, thought of it that way. But of course, well, I don't know. I mean, the text I deal with all the time has been, I mean, the Bible is just,
Yeah.
it's just all over the place.
Yeah. Patient
Wow.
zero meme virus. That's
Yeah. Well, I've pestered you for a half hour, and I don't know what this is your time, and I'd love to, you've certainly offered me, what I want out of this, but what would you like out of this?
I kind of just dig like watching you, and like because like one of the things that like I try to do in my life is just sort of be present, be able to listen to others, and then particularly for people who are hard to listen to, and I feel like you have a real gift for like making just anybody feel at ease, and give them the space to dig, and I'm sure in your pastoring, like you're able to go quite a bit further there, and so like I don't really have like a soapbox, to get on here to use this time. People are giving their time here to us, and like I'd love to be able to give to you, dear listener, something of value, but it's like what I have to offer really is just my story, and an encouragement to, like, if you're considering the Christian faith, or if you're in it, like just like really lean into it, and see what God will do with your meager offering.
Well, I could certainly keep peppering you with questions. I mean, that's what I love to do. So what would you, so you're doing children's stuff right now. What are some of your dreams with respect to your career? What would you really love to do? I mean, do you want to start your own things? Do you want to write stories? Do you want to, I mean, what would you really love to do?
People ask me that a lot. I've never really planned it out. But the thing with animation is that, like, the longer you're in it, the more you realize how young everyone is in the industry. There seems to be a bottleneck. Like once you start getting into your late 30s or so, like the crowd really begins to thin. And then it's like you're either like a director, or you've just gone on to do other things, because the industry craves young blood. People straight out of school who like need to earn quick bucks, and there isn't a lot of place in today's environment for older and more experienced animators. And so lately I've been transitioning to story and direction and things like that, but there's really there's no safe avenue, as like my ideas are starting to become more forefront, more prominent. There's the risk that I become more and more niche, not just in terms of my moral leanings, but in terms of my interests, the stories I want to tell that are not necessarily profitable, or don't necessarily, they don't scale in terms of interest so much, because like a lot of the stuff that's popular, I don't care for all that much, and I don't intend to emulate that. And so audience size dwindles. And I was listening, an old client of mine who brought me to stay with his family in New York for a number of years ago. He recently on his podcast interviewed Dag Tenaple.
Yeah,
who was
I know that is.
Well, yeah, the Earthworm gym guy, until just recently he exploded in popularity because he started dabbling into politics and whatnot, which is just nuts. But like the thing that he said then, before he was huge, was that it's a time to, like, the technology is there to start your own thing, find your own audience, get a group of people going, who are interested in your stuff and are funding you directly. And I suppose that's the wise thing to do. But like my heart doesn't feel it, because like there's so much hustling in the realm of selling yourself, to say like, this is why my product is worth your time. And I don't want to do that. Like, I just want to make cool stories. I just want to bring together the illusion of life, Disney said. And it's, I guess when you go into a field like this, you're really always, you get used to the idea of doing the thing that your heart desires, doing the thing that brings you a sense of fulfillment. And these practical matters of like how I'm going to sustain this long-term with a family now developing sort of gets left to the wayside. And so it forces you to think outside of your comfort zone. And I'm like, go into business for myself. Animation is like, first of all, really expensive. If I were to go into business for myself, I'd probably be just doing comics or something, or start my own illustration studio, or open an animation studio, start hiring animators. But that's risky. That's risky business right there. Could do it, but I've not really felt like there was, in terms creatively, like the story I wanted to tell, and then like build whatever framework around that was necessary to get it out into the world, And so it's, I don't know, it's unfortunate to say that, I am a bit unambitious in this realm, and that could spell certain doom, once I hit those late 30s, that bottleneck period. But we'll see. So far I'm really loving what I'm doing, and if I'm not feeling the fire now, like my elephant isn't like gonna be steering anytime soon. Unless like, now I take a lot of unlesses. There are a lot of different unlesses. I don't want to say that, this is for sure going to be how it's going to play out, but that's just what I'm not doing for the moment.
It's sort of the artist's dilemma. So I had two sisters. My younger sister passed away a few years ago, but my older sister has a YouTube channel, and she's an artist, and she's always had an artist temperament, and she's very high in openness. She's very, music, visual arts. I mean, she can photography. I mean, she can just do anything she sort of lays her hand on, she can do stuff with. And I listen to you, and just knowing what I've known of her life, she's a little bit older than I am, and there's a whole bunch of things happened. I should really bring her on my channel. She's got her own YouTube channel. She's doing podcasts, and she's just doing all kinds of crazy things. But the funny thing is that she's so, she so follows her heart that once she starts getting traction in something like photography, she just loses interest. She's like, I don't want to take pictures of people's kids and high school kids and their weddings. It's just boring. I want to do this. And so she does. And not terribly good for income generation, but at the same time, she hasn't starved. And
Sure.
and yeah, and I think I don't know, I think probably combined with your sense of trust in God and his providence, artists, they might not, just a tiny little group of them make a lot of money. Almost everybody else is starving, of course, starving artists, but they do have interesting lives. And so I guess I know exactly the kinds of tensions you're talking about. I feel them somewhat with this YouTube channel. This morning I was walking here to church, and I was thinking, I don't want a channel where I just talk to high status people and famous people, because I mean, that's sort of how you build your YouTube channel. Your story is much more interesting to me. It really is, because your story is, well, it's not that famous people's stories aren't real, but there is a quality difference. Your story is, your story is very fresh. There are angles in your story that someone sitting down to write it couldn't. I mean, that's sort of it's the griminess, it's the grittiness, it's the reality of it that your father, the fish bone. I mean, God writes the best stories, and he's writing one with you. And, you and your wife are going to have a child, and I mean, it's just a beautiful story. And what God is going to do with you and your talent and your heart, I will there be tragedy? Yes. Will there be struggle? Yes. Will there be moments of deep pain? Yes. There be moments of glory? Yes. And this is these are the kind of stories that God writes. And so I don't know. I want to encourage you to it's so I'm not a follow your dream kind of advice guy, except when I see someone like you and I think, yeah, you know, sure, you and your wife are gonna have to figure out. I mean, once that baby comes,
Mhm.
your values are gonna change because suddenly your wife is gonna be like, we gotta keep this baby alive. And you're
Yeah.
like, yeah, and I gotta keep you alive too. And suddenly there's a seriousness about all kinds of things that as newly married people, you don't, two can live as cheaply as one, yada yada yada. But when that baby comes now, that baby's going to need to be educated, and we're going to need to keep that. I remember we had our first child when we were in the Dominican Republic, and my mother-in-law would always, she before we would leave or something, she'd always say, keep the baby safe. And it's like, well, what do you think, we're hanging him out? We were doing Michael Jackson, dingling him over the edge of the porch. No, we're keeping the baby safe. It's just deeply built into most of us. So no, I love your story, and it'll be very interesting to see what God does because it sounds like you and your wife have, you're wonderful Christian people, and you have great giving hearts, and you have a heart for hospitality. Who knows where God's going to take this story with the two of you? It's exciting. So,
Well, he's already populated our story with like so many like interesting cast members. I like to think of myself as like playing a supportive role in other people's lives, but in our lives, we've had the opportunity to welcome so many interesting folks. Like one of my closest friends is like he's older than me, but he's like a Kurdish mathematician who was like imprisoned several times for like political revolt. And like
wow.
he became a Christian after having like these visions of Christ, and it's like, and like now he's here in Montreal, and like we hang out, and it's like all these people, like obviously it's a city, so it's a very cosmopolitan. You get a whole bunch of different people, but it's like you sort of filter out the folks, because prior to that, all of my friends were artists, which are they're interesting,
Yeah.
but we're all kind of the same. We all kind of similar vision of life, but like since starting to go to church, in a city, it's like people from all walks of life, who are like people who work in like restaurants, people who are teachers, people who are not living anywhere in particular right now. One guy is like a Hasidic background, and like sort of Harvard guy, and came and kind of threw a lot away in order to follow Christ, and I don't know, it's just been a lot of fun, and despite a lot of the hurt, I'm filtering out a lot here, but in order to I guess it's sad to say, but there's a selling here. There's a selling of the life that I think is kind of the one that God would like each of us to walk in. That life might include getting martyred, or like becoming like really poor, or like whatever. But
Yeah.
the fact that that you're connected to the source of, you're often talking like God number one, God number two, and it's like, I love talking about like the arenic God, abstract God, but I think everyone should start with like just a big man in the sky, and like the Father, and you can just talk to him, obviously with reverence and all that. But it's like it really, like, it's a huge paradigm shift, and then it filters down to every aspect of your life. It's quite soul nourishing.
That is in fact where the vast majority of people start.
Mm,
And the interesting thing, I mean, I liked in your story where you talked about, you know, you're open to everything, and at some point you realize, oh, wait a minute, I've
mm,
got to, I I can believe anything, and that's huge potential, but it's also, potential often goes either way. And so, but
Yeah.
in our culture, that's, if I'm mostly talking to a certain group of people that are very much within a secular frame, it's that openness to God number two that
Mm.
freaks them the heck out. And because they watch people do, and there's plenty of craziness. I mean, as a pastor, you see it all the time, and it depends. A lot of it as a pastor depends. I've been in lots of different religious contexts over my life, and usually you're either sort of trying to help people lean one way or another. If you've got a group that's just so God number two, they're all over the map, it's kind of like, maybe we should hem this in a little bit. God
Mm.
is active and alive, but he probably didn't say that. Then you've got another group of people, often some Presbyterians or Christian Reformed people sometimes, who are so, everything is so systemic and locked in and locked down, and it's like, do you think God might surprise you with something? I mean, if you look at this book, it's full of surprises. So, and so as a pastor, you're always sort of leaning people towards one thing or another, either a little bit more gas or a little bit more brake, because let's keep the car on the road. And that's just sort of what pastors do often, is just kind of, okay, you don't want things to die, but you
Yeah.
don't want things to go careening. And so it's
Mm.
always, okay, a little bit more of this, a little less of this. So that's,
Give the vine like a stalk, like a kind of a stick to
yes,
pound on.
great illustration. Because the truth is, if it doesn't, I mean, a vine without that stick, well, the tomato plant, let's say,
Mm.
without the structure, will be all over the ground and the tomatoes will rot. So if you really want the plant to produce fruit, you give it a
Mm.
little bit more structure. That's a great illustration. I'm going to steal that. That's a good one.
I do illustrations all day, Paul. It's yeah,
You're an
the,
illustrator after all. Well, I'll
the,
tell you, the only thing people remembers out of sermons tends to be illustrations. So
yeah.
it's just how we work. Well,
I'd be,
we only have 5 or so more minutes. So any things you really wanted to get to, and oh, here's my chance. And you're not a soapbox person, which I think is something that people really appreciate about you, because the world
uh,
isn't lacking soapboxes.
well, I mean, we could just talk and then like, okay, we're done, and then like just like fade out to black. I don't really have a concluding statement, just because
Okay.
I've just been finding this kind of fun.
Oh,
Um,
good.
Gonna riff off of like what you were saying, like that dynamic of like, there or there.
Yeah.
That was the same dynamic in the Presbyterian church that I continued to attend up until COVID. I was going to two churches, and there it's like we have like the old the Scottish Presbyterians with their view, the ones who never come to the prayer meetings, and then we had like the group of ladies from Jamaica, and they were very, praising God, clapping, the only ones clapping. Oh, they're kind of awkward, but they wouldn't stop. And it's like, it was just kind of fun to see that clash continue on within the church. And somehow it worked in the sense that, I watched that church dwindle in size over the course of a decade, as you've spoken about many times. But, it's, there are elements there that maybe, would be worth turning a new chapter over, but there are elements also worth preserving, and it's why I've stuck around, trying to see if I could be useful in some way there.
Yeah. Well, God writes these stories, and I've been in a lot of church situations where you have sort of the people who are, that's just how that's just how they were raised, and then others, they were raised a different way, and then they come together, and they're not going to be like them, but they're sure glad they're here. And they're, and everybody then sort of plays their part, and it can become a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So no, I've seen a lot of that, but I'm just happy to, I'm just happy to hear your story, and to have a story on a face, because, in the open studio, it's like, well, that's kind of a cool, because I look at the building that you're in, and it's like, that's a, the wood reminds me of the East, because you'll find all of that nice wood in North American East, because the good
Hmm.
forests were still up when those cities were being built. And you come out to the West and it's like, you don't have all that nice wood anymore because it was all cut down in the 19th and early 20th century. And so, okay, so he's somewhere out East. And then, you were helping me with, with a little bit of French language. And then he's in front of this thing and he's clearly drawing. He said, "You're an illustrator, so it's okay." And every now and then, so, and the open studio is a weird thing, but I do see it as sort of a way to, because in real life, you start going to a church, let's say, and you kind of look around. And of course,
Hmm.
you just sort of focus on this thing or that thing, usually because that's what you're bringing to the situation. The people there don't see it anymore because they've been going forever. They're seeing other things that are far down deeper in terms of, probably their annoyances with each other and the little petty feuds and, why they like this minister or don't like that minister. I mean, it's just all of this stuff. Everybody sees different things when they walk in the room,
Hmm.
but that's sort of the slow process in which you actually, the world sort of opens itself up to you. Because, okay, so you start going to this Presbyterian church and you went there as a kid, but of course maybe some of the people are there might remember you, other people are new.
Hmm.
And then, but it's just sort of this continual opening. And then, oh, this person, I've seen this person around. And then just so happens this Sunday I sat next to this person, handed them a bulletin, and then we had a little exchange. And I found out, oh, they work over there or they live over there. And then you hear a little bit of their story. And then it's like, of course, they probably told you a whole lot more story, but you just remembered that little bit because it connected to something in you. And I mean, it's just the way the world opens up. So
That's how the bridge has been opening up for me. So
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, and that's such a, for me too, that's just such a fascinating experiment in terms of, there's a both of, two bridgers today signed up for slots. And I, just mentally, I'm always, is the sign up sufficiently random? Are there enough slots? It's just, the world is a big complex place, but I've at least for my YouTube channel and for my experience on the internet, I it's, again, just like I said before, the story you told about your own life. How many people are like that in the world? Your father's age, your mother's nationality, going back to, going to Montreal, growing up an only child, watching a lot of cartoons, really getting into that, starting flip books. I mean, your whole story, there's not another person in the world with a story like yours.
hmm.
And your conversion, meeting your wife right before COVID, can't do a honeymoon. It's just glorious. And
Been fun. Thank you for the opportunity to share it.
oh, it's my pleasure. All right, Ivan, you take care, and I will see you on the Discord.
See you around. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.